get the biggest group and most things to cover, and obviously it's not possible to do all of that in one day. So we'll just go over kind of what we were thinking about and our take on it. So some of the initial bits are just this is going back to the very basis of how do you know what's sustainable. So when we put economic, environmental, and social together, we just ask basic questions like what would make a city economically sustainable? Things have to be affordable. Can I have the cheat sheet? Just when you ask yourself what makes a city environmentally sustainable is using the resources that you really need, and socially sustainable is making it a city where you will really want to live. So we asked ourselves all these questions about what would make it more sustainable, and this was when we were at a generic point, so we came up with different parameters, like under social sustainability, the fact that everything would be accessible, equity, enough spaces for fun and recreation, a healthy environment, education and learning, culture and heritage. Similarly, under environmental, conservation of biodiversity and the natural ecosystems, energy, waste, water, appropriate land use. So these were all parameters to get a sense of how sustainable, to in a way even measure how sustainable is. And then we, so instead of going down a hypothetical route, we narrowed down on Pune as a city, and we said, sorry, so this is actually just, once we had these indicators and parameters, we said, okay, how do we prioritize these? And from this list, we essentially prioritized these, saying that what would make a city most sustainable is the fact that it should have an identity, good public access and transportation. I used to that. Maintaining natural ecosystem. Also, non-entitled population to be included in development, which basically means making city more inclusive in terms of slum areas and things like that. And then we said, okay, what are the things that we would not like in terms of have-nots? So that has to do with traffic congestion, pollution, air, noise, and water, access and distribution of public spaces and amenities. The other have-nots are mismanagement of water. We often face scarcity of water. Safety for women, children, and even the elderly. And encroachment of land and water bodies. And this is not just the same non-entitled population doing this, but this is, permission granted to even developers and things like that to build on land that they really shouldn't be building on. So we said, to address these problems, what kind of approach should we adopt? And therefore, how do we go about finding the solutions? So the approach we adopted, or this was kind of the overarching, guideline, which was, instead of it being top-down, we need to now have it bottom-up, which means people who live there begin to get more involved and more engaged in how decisions are made for their city, or for their city being the largest level, then for their neighborhood, and for their ward, and then in their neighborhood. So there are different levels of engagement, and this would perhaps help even city authorities make a more informed decision. So we took some of the key problems and quickly wrote down the different causes. So for example, to do with traffic, improving connectivity, road networks, making it a pedestrian-oriented city. mismanagement of water, so looking at losses. And for some of these, the most important thing is being able to measure and monitor, because especially to do with mismanagement of water, going back and looking at what monitoring systems and what measurement systems already exist, and therefore you can then begin to identify losses in the entire sort of distribution system, which if solved adequately could kind of help you get over the problem of water shortage. Similarly, lack of safety, a lot of these things can be even solved by better design. So we get, so the tools to come up with some of these solutions, we'll just share in just a bit, but some of these causes of the problems to do with safety have to do with poor design, so inadequate lighting in some public spaces. For example, waste disposal also has things like lack of civic sense. That was in fact one of the biggest most recurring causes for some of these problems is we don't often know how to use spaces or things properly, and how perhaps now we need to change that with better design. And encroachment, again, poor enforcement of land use plan, and therefore jeopardizing how the city should grow and its sustainability. So, with regard to each of these, we came up with more detailed solutions. So, under traffic congestion, looking at, I'm actually not going to read every single one, but I'll just sum it up. So, for each of the points, we came up with certain solutions. Some of these have to do with design, some of them have to do with better technology, some of them have to do with creating awareness, and of course, some of them have to do with enforcement of a certain policy. This would even be, incentivizing or de-incentivizing some of these. So these are solutions that we've just listed down. We haven't categorized them or even at this point measured the impact of any of these. Similarly, we'll take one as an example, which is citizen safety. So keeping in mind, how we plan our public spaces, adequate lighting, gender-sensitive design. We were having this discussion of how sometimes public spaces are designed more for a male-oriented use rather than gender-neutral. And just to summarize this, so this is where we are at right now. But what we need to do, so going back to our approach which talks about getting everybody involved and engaged, we will obviously go back and look at these solutions and find a way to categorize them. And I have a small video that I think that we should all take a look at, and this is perhaps one of the ways in which we can address an issue. This has to do with energy at a city level. So, how do you get people involved and focused on one issue? And here it's about how in California they did this sort of social experiment on getting people aware about energy consumption. So someone could just help me down it. And we still have a long way to go, but what we want to try and do is look at some of these sort of examples to address our issues, so that even at policy level, we're looking at a different way of tackling this instead of more straightforward thing, which sometimes gets overlooked.
How do we do it? Any questions? Can we have the slide back?
Gender-sensitive design, just some of these other things. How do you attack them?
Since the rest of the team has contributed to the presentation, I can take questions.
Separate those two mics. Leave those two mics separate.
I suppose I can be heard. Well, when we looked at how it's to be done, there were three options we were looking at. One is the current option, which is master planning, policy implementation, enforcement. Known options. Haven't worked. The third one has been tried enough, but is likely to work. And we call that social engagement. Social engagement starting from the household. For each one of these, any one of these solutions can and should start at home, expanded to the mohalla or the lane, then to the ward and ward officer, and moved upwards to the planning cell. Now this happens probably just as the previous gentleman in the film said, change in attitudinal and behavioral patterns. And if everybody in the mohalla starts doing it, the law is in place. In Pune, for example, mohalla committees have been formed. They started getting empowered by actually ensuring, first, by finding out who their operator is, who their ward officer is. Till now, nobody knew anything about it except probably knowing the name of the commissioner. So this engagement with themselves and civic change is one of the key paths, or I would say one of the avenues through which solutions need to be addressed and achieved. The key to that is not one-off consultation or what is normally talked about as public hearings, because people hear something well stated and go back home and not do anything about it. It's a continuous civic engagement which was missing, and we've said that that would be one of the ways in which any of these solutions could be taken forward, rather than having, of course, we also have the good design, the good material, good buildings, good cases, but need to be again taken through this process of social engagement or individual engagement, familial engagement, and then taken upwards. This was one of the ways in which we thought, how do we do it? This is the way to do it, and this is bottom up. It's socially sensitive. It gets checked each time anybody does anything. There's focused attention on it. The press is interested in it, because the press is not interested in how good the plan was. The press is interested in how the locals want to engage in that planning or implementation process. I think that was one of the discussions which we had. Maybe that answers part of the question. Yes, sir.
Yeah. What I suggest is, whatever we are discussing, we should keep on adding it to the solving report.
That is a starter. I think the rest have done a fair amount of detailing which couldn't get into a PowerPoint presentation. It's in their head, everybody's got it. But it will get detailed.
A couple of other things that that I would like to add that I couldn't really gauge from the slide, obviously. Quite limited. From an eco-cities point of view, the number one thing that comes to my mind is the carrying capacity in terms of the natural resources or the available fresh water or the capacity to generate regionally electricity, those kind of lines. And the second one that comes to my mind is some kind of a parametric evaluation which sets a benchmark or an apples to apples comparison, which then defines what an eco-city is. Something like that. Are these points being deliberated by?
Yeah, I mean that should be the way forward, is where you can measure each of these. But that's the only way we can benchmark and we can gauge whether or not it's.
Are we likely to see any of these parameters over the next generation of the?
Maybe not all of them, but
some of them, whatever the key ones are. We will never have a
couple of examples certainly.
Yeah.
But the instruments are available. For instance, we have the ESRs.
Yes.
ESRs have been done pretty well in the past, pretty well in the sense, it was a very good start. Sharad Mahajan and many others of us were party to it. But converting it into measurable, objectively verifiable criteria or objectively verifiable benchmarks is something which we have not as yet reached. It's still to come, it needs to evolve. And the first question that you were talking about was related to how to make the local resources or how to make the local resources the first step in understanding or creating more value.
It's basically balancing the demand and supply.
Exactly.
Because some ways we are over demanding from whatever we have. Or if that over demand is because of inefficiency, then that could be one of the challenges.
Like water.
Like an efficient system will demand less, and hence the carrying capacity can sustain that.
Actually, this example was discussed here. That every household measures the own or has its own water audit and energy audit. Energy audit people know about it, can be literally taken from the meters. But water audit is very difficult. And it requires the entire family contribution, engagement to enable water audit. If water audit is done, people start realizing that it's not that water is less, that they are not using it sensibly. It starts from there and then the measurement goes on. So there's top-down, bottom-up. Top-down is if you start measuring water at the release point at the reservoir, then you keep on measuring it till it reaches the last man. Last man has measured it at his household, then you have a top-down, bottom-up synthesis, which enables you to find out where it is actually. So these are possible, these are discussed, but I think we need to put them when we do the detail.
But we metering at individual level help. I think I believe it is tried in cities like Surat and some other places. But there are a lot of resistance at local level. The corporators they have resisted. There should not be any metering.
Why is that resistance? Has there been any?
Metered billing.
Is it because water is a basic?
One, see,
right.
like what he said, he was not, nobody is doing, water audit, and eventually you see there is no metering. If you look at, the intake point or the, water treatment plants and the major, distribution points, in most of the cities the meters are not there. So unless you meter it, because right now we are involved in this, the ESCO projects what I was talking about in Gujarat, in the pilot phase 10 cities. So we did it one city, I am not naming the city, but there is not a single meter at the intake point nor at the treatment points, and where it is fed to the overhead tanks. Overhead tanks, how it is done, it's just a level control. Then they feed it morning and evening as per the schedule. So there is no metering at the generation point, and you forget about the user point. And what case I have cited in Surat, I think it was done at a pilot level. So basically, the meter reader need not physically go to the place and read what is done with the electrical meters in our household. We carry the handheld meter, and the readings are captured to a certain distance. But people came to know, and they destroyed that sensor, so that it will not work. So that's a local resistance, but it's a beautiful initiative done. So I think that is
So I can give a good example of successful example. I know of no city in India which has done comprehensive, detailed leak detection at both ends. That means supply system leakages and disposal system leakages, because leakage is happening at both.
One city has done Nalkampur.
Sorry?
Nalkampur in Satara district has done it, and they have done it for 7 years.
Yes, a water balance.
No, but excellent example at a much smaller level, yes. But it has been done. I'm very heartened to know that it has been done.
7 years.
But yes, agree. But I'm saying, well, I shouldn't have said not a single city, but I really was talking about the large cities. This is a good example which needs to be upscaled. Pune, for example, has been flooded with requests asking for leak detection systems. project has not yet taken off the table. Hopefully during this, after the change, the thing will take place. I think what I will stop at saying is that there are many such systems, many other solutions available which can't be detailed out in the PowerPoint.
Can I
I
ask
would
one?
like to just, you talked about environment and three things. So I'm just wondering that how would you look at the issue of slums or the matter for social equity in cities? Because the point is there, but I just
Basically, ideally, but they are not moving to that direction. Where is the mic?
I think the basic thrust of everybody's argument was in situ conversion of slums into very liberal. See, what you call slum is a similar is a place which is good as habitation. It's a community habitation, but having certain flaws. So in situ conversion or in situ restoration probably costs the least and should be one of the options that's available. And it has been tried, I think, Bashar has tried it.
what
in
about
many
the
others.
issue related to
Sorry?
slums are created for one reason because of migration from the rural areas. So how does one look at the thing in totality?
See, if one is looking at avoiding migration, which results into slums, it becomes a national developmental issue and goes well out of the ambit of city planning. Because then you're talking about no droughts and no floods and no disasters anywhere else happening which would lead to migration. And if it stops in your state, then it can come from other states or even other countries. For instance, your sea level rise will probably lead to huge migrations into Calcutta. So how are you going to stop them? That's not even within your borders. What one is trying to look at is assume that that's going to happen and then get ready and prepared for it in terms of how you're going to manage it or how you're going to prioritize your investment in such a fashion that there's the least damage either to the environment or least inequity in terms of amenities made available to the ones who come into the city.
I think one more aspect to it is, when we're thinking about the slums, that's unavoidable, but if you're building a city, let's build it in a way that there should not be slums, but there could be informal housing, with people who are coming to work, who have houses in villages, essentially coming there, they're not coming there to own houses, but they're coming there to work. So how the city is going to accommodate those such that they also get the atmosphere to work without disturbing the fabric of the city and they can be assimilated into the city. So some of the, some of the way the housing has to be built, with character, but that is facilitated instead of, either turning a blind eye to it, then it becomes a problem. And once it has become a problem, then it's too big a problem for a city to solve.
I think yesterday we were discussing some parts of this and it seemed to us that we were looking at how the British, for example, when they made their mills in Bombay, we also had mill working, they created halls for the workers to stay, accommodation for everyone. That was considered in the planning process. Right now, all these slums are coming up because of course, one of the reasons I know is that people come from working as laborers and then they end up in the slums. So that unplanned process is there, and I think that is what is kind of. And if we look at institute slums is a good thing, but then how much and to what extent, and how much can be accommodated, what is the carrying capacity, all those things come into the.
So that needs to be thought over. So it's very only that it should not come in unplanned. For example, one thing like in a society that I stayed in Bombay, there were 1,200 flats. 1,200 flats, there are at least 2,000 maids that work there. Now, any society that comes up, you know the kind of informal support staff that would be required. Then while the societies are being planned, there has to be adequate provision for the people who will be living there. And these are the people who would not be committing to motorized means of transportation or public transportation, but they will be walking. So there has to be a distance at the walking and the cycling. So an avenue has to be built, you know. Now these people have taken up a hill and created a slum. So slum to me is just unplanned people who have, you know, put up their shacks somewhere and over the time it grows.
Yes, they have most of the slums in Bombay, for example, are on wetlands, on hills, on all the ecologically sensitive areas.
But they have to stay somewhere.
They have to stay somewhere.
And we need them. It's not that we don't even need them. We need them for our daily lives.
Any idea what is the response of people to rental housing? Because Bombay went heavily on rental housing. MMRDA did create large number of rental houses.
They wanted to create.
No, they created one.
They created a system and a policy.
Okay, they haven't created one.
They created one. I think there's one thing that
I think
in Panvel.
Yeah.
That's
That's
probably the only one that I've heard of, but I don't think it's successful yet. And rental housing is not for a service oriented. I mean, a person at a 10,000 rupee pagar cannot probably stay at rental housing. It's probably going to be at least a 30,000 rupee household or a 40,000 rupee household that can probably afford rental housing.
No, rental housing, the objective was when anybody migrates new and for few months till he gets a job, so he needs to have some place to stay in the night. So whole day, so there's a lock and key, you can keep your belongings in the lock and key, whole day can go search for a job, work, in the night he comes, so he has a place to stay, take a bath. And idea was to pay about 50 rupees, 100 rupees.
What's the next step to that? How long can he stay there? If he stays there for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you think he'll be able to earn enough money to get into an actual house?
That was the objective of rental house.
It's impossible. I mean, it's absolutely impossible with Bombay's.
No, at the moment they have no place to stay. They just sleep on the road.
No, I think what we're saying is create an informal sector. You can call it an informal sector or rental housing. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What we call a natural sector actually. The formal and informal is already established by virtue of the law.
This rental housing, another issue which came up later on when the stop got created, Shiv Sena and MLA said that it has to be given to only Marathas. And then everything stopped. And it's not only the policy or bureaucratic policy, it is also politics and state politics that matter.
Yeah.
I would like the group to ask some other question. Vijay, no, you certainly mentioned the bottom of planning and involvement at various levels. It sounds very nice in this workshop. Reality is that there is a existing top-down planning process which works everywhere, whether it is central level or state level or even at ULP level. You have been a part of the plan, development plan for Pune, you have seen it. Normally it is getting some data, churning it, this thing, and also identifying certain norms. And then just use those norms and that data and come up with certain things and that's how the plan gets prepared. But that is a fact. So have you thought something about the norms?
Right. I think the norms have to evolve depending on the capacity of the given society to support them. Because you can, for example, how much water and sanitation you give to the first entrant who lands up from a drought-affected area. So it becomes a norm. Now if you stick to it and make it replicable or applicable to the entire state, district or nation, it becomes ridiculous. So norms have to be dynamic and they have to change. So he moves from the first stage where he enters or is about to enter the city. And the norm changes as he moves on, as he has mentioned, when and if he gets his employment. Usually, I would beg to differ, but it's the second or the third day that he starts earning. It's probably only on the first day that he's not earning. The second day he finds something to do. He may settle after a long time to get a reasonable employment, but he is not without work on the second day. This is one reality which I am aware of. One could think of not an area, I mean the plan could include, for instance, in the case of Pune plan we had thought of 5 entry points. There are 6 major highways that come into the city. At the mouth or at the end of that highway as it enters the city, there is a stage 1, I wouldn't call it a camp or labor camp or a refugee camp, but it's some place where as a first step they wait. They start looking for things, and because eventually he has the freedom to find out which is the no man's land, revenue land, wetland or any land which nobody is paying attention to, where he can go and settle. For instance, in all streams and nalas which are rights of way, there are settlements. Because this is where everybody else puts their rubbish and garbage. This is also where the slums will develop in strips. So what one is looking at is not permanent norm. One is looking at measures which are incremental and successional. So when the final stage of this succession would be give him maybe an RSA. RSA ka RSA? SRA. That's the stage, that is the best one can do for an migrating inward family. But then it has to go through this succession which needs to be planned. Right now what's happening is there is no way in which one can actually allocate finances for that. And here again it's a stitch in time business. If you don't do anything at the beginning, eventually when you want to do it, it costs a lot. But if you're tracking the whole, not each family but each segment of the migrating population, then what Rajendra is saying starts happening. That they find routes through which to be able to do it. And internalization is one of my pet ideas. You don't have pockets allocated for them, but they are internalized within the normal industrial, business and residential areas. So that way they cease to be slums, they become located within the, integrated within the so-called developed, so-called entitled population. And gradually from being non-entitled, they become entitled. So the question is how does a society look at it and allow them to become an entitled person, not simply because they have television at home or a refrigerator, but they are accepted in that mohalla as normal citizens. So this process is probably could be a part of the DPs that we are preparing. Right now it is not. I haven't seen any major DP which includes a process or a chapter which deals with unexpected migrants, expected migrants, rates of, there are rates and norms given for everything, but there is no rate being developed for populations coming. What is the rate at which populations have come during different decades in the last, say, 30 years in Pune? How much was it? Why was it caused? What were the causes? These are studies which nobody bothers to do. These are very interesting studies because where he came from and why he came this way can give you the next orders of succession and where to then place him or guide him to do it. Because there are NGOs and there are government departments capable of doing it. What is absent is the idea that this should be done formally and systematically by design. This is also design. This is systems design. This is not building material design, this is systems design. So you accept it as a part of a system and then make it happen in an organized manner. Then it becomes a system design which is sensitive. So we talked about sensitivity, social sensitivity, gender sensitivity and so on. This sensitivity comes if the city population recognizes them as legitimate in-migrants. The major resistance point is that those who are inside the compartment feel that anybody who wants to come into the compartment He's an outsider, so try and push him out. Once he comes inside, he also does the same. He doesn't want anybody else to come in. Till the next station. So now Pune is always in this next station business syndrome, where every year an X number is coming. We know the numbers. These numbers have to be accepted as reality, and then planned. So we don't have a chapter on that. I don't know whether a development plan actually contains a chapter for organized methods of converting these so-called non-entitled migrants or refugees into resident populations.
I think
I have a question.
let's
Looking
get
at
into
this
question.
video which was shown there.
Please, there are lots of good answers available in our group. Please do not review.
Let's keep this as the last question. We are running out of time. So,
Taking a cue from this video which is shown, would you consider that there could be a city's rating system? I mean, correctly speaking, it should be for the whole country, perhaps, and it could be to start with. Perhaps it could be for Maharashtra, say, all the cities which are more than 1 lakh population and so on. A rating system to compare what, say, Pune is doing, say, compared to what Nagpur is doing and so on. And maybe, do you think that that can be, does your group think that that can be sort of trigger the authorities that be in each city to do something and go for a better, the visibility or better image for the city?
Truly acceptable. It's a good example that makes, as has been pointed out. So if one city decides to do this and is able to set the ball rolling, it may have to be changed along the line because the succession might change in different cities. So if one city does it, we have an example of a smaller one that's done it. We need to have a big example, and then it would, a rating is possible. But rating is possible if you have set the norms. If you have said that if any city is able to internalize in X number of years, it's grade A. If for 20 years the fellows who have come in still are not internalized, then it's grade C. You know, that it can be time oriented, it can be dependent on how much money he has made, it can be dependent upon whether he started to speak the language and has got culturally integrated, and so on. You can have several parameters.
I was not talking about the slums, I was talking about the overall city.
No, but the logic applies to everybody. It's the logic of succession.
That's actually a great idea. So the only and it's not been thought about. I don't think there's anyone who's doing it. There are some initiatives. There's this triple GI initiative, GGGI initiative, which basically does that. It goes to different cities and helps them understand how to prioritize their problems and then come up with solutions. But it's still not a rating system. The only thing would be is that who gives you that rating? You know, here there's an Indian Green Building Council that rates your township or building or whatever. So in this case, it would just be interesting to figure out what sort of council gives you this rating system. But nevertheless, I think it's a very interesting.
Let me add here.
Yeah, I think Dr. Jagdani could consider this. It's a very interesting.
From an energy perspective, if we refer the clip, let me just give this information. We have done a baseline survey for the entire city of Gujarat that covers 159 urban local bodies and the 7 corporations. Especially I am talking about the street lighting and the pumping systems. It's a detailed baseline study. I have the data in this PC. So basically what we have done, what is the the service level, what we are talking about better services for the citizens. So in terms of illumination, in terms of per capita water consumption. So these figures basically we have the national, international numbers are available. So we have done a baseline study through experts, and we have prepared it the city wise, and that details are available. And at a national level, Bureau of Energy Efficiency has picked up few cities, like 4-5 cities in Gujarat Gujarat, 4-5 cities in Maharashtra. They picked up the entire, nation, state-wise, and these reports are available in public domain. So details are available. With reference to that, we are now going a step forward for implementation and how to achieve that. Of course, it is not a star level, but how to achieve that 30 lakhs for a class A road and 150 liters per day, per capita consumption. How to meet that numbers. So that is being.
I think we will have to wrap it up on that. Is it possible for the group to list, prepare a parametric, prioritized list of thrust areas that you feel are important for Indian cities to emerge as ecosystems? That is one thing. And the second one is, can we start looking at parameters that we will use to evaluate cities? So the parametric evaluation tools have to start developing. So these are the two things that you would really like to see from the group. And whatever the parameter, it doesn't have to be exact science and stuff, but that is the big thing.
We're doing it for one cities because developing it for cities at large is a very big exercise.
No, it's not cities that every city doesn't have to have different parameters. It's the same parameters that apply for all cities.
I mean, it's like
parameters are always the same.
I know, but since we picked Pune, I think we should stick to that because at the end of this, I mean, what is the outcome of this?
We never picked Pune as such, but it's open for any. It's open to be implemented anyway.
I think
it's the understanding behind.
Not for all the cases. Few cases.
I think what is doable is taking two. I mean, we may take two. We may take, for instance, slums water, or we may take energy and something. Because detailing all these out to their last expensive detail would be impossible within an hour.
That's why I said.
Therefore, maybe take one or two and then
priority. The priority can be
because for tier 1 cities it's different, for tier 2 cities this sort of system will be different. The parameters would change and the way you measure it would also change. So I think maybe
certainly they would change, but they would still be the same. Parameters would be same. Their weights might change. So that's a different.
Most important parameters. So, but why can't we use the international parameters that they use for 18 cities? I mean, on a scale where Bombay comes in at 134 or 150, or Copenhagen is probably on number 3.
They do, it's like safety.
So,
energy.
no, why don't we search on the net for those and put them down and then we can adapt those? Because at the end of the day, it's going to become a simple copycat situation.
At least, the starting point is a prioritized list of thrust areas. So this is what will transform our cities into better cities. And the parameters then come down as to what is a better city, livability, accessibility, basic utilities or whatever it is. So those then build up after that. So it's kind of a universal structure. It don't have to be specific to any city as such.
Are we talking only about the existing cities or large number of new cities are emerging?
No, we're doing existing cities and I don't think we should change that because otherwise, it will be too much. Yeah.
We have to address that also because large number of new cities. I mean, everywhere now you have Naya Raipur coming up, you have regional now, PMRD is there looking for expansion of cities, and what kind of guidelines we are going to give there? I mean what we are talking about is only the reception cities,
But then we need to have different parameters, different set of.
But certain criteria could be common, like water, waste, energy, mobility. So those parameters.
See, the parameters will always stay the same. Their weightage and their application would differ.
No, if it's existing and a new thing, it could be totally different.
yes, I would agree with that. See, one is an organically evolved city, and one is a planned city of the kind you are mentioning, New Amka. That New Amka has to be finished in 8 to 10 years.
No.
An evolved city evolves over maybe a couple of years.
All the cities, all the major cities, they are coming with a regional development plan. Just like we have for Pune, PMRDA. Mumbai, we have MMRDA. Rajkot, we have Rajkot Regional Development Authority. Surat, everywhere we have a regional development.
That's
Because, now we must implement something. Now what they are doing now, what are the regional development authorities doing? When cities were developing, all the Gram Panchayats haphazardly constructed, and ideal case when we traveled yesterday from Pune to outskirts, you can see the haphazard development happening in Pau, Perambur and so on. And then to resolve the issues and problems created, expand the cities, and no roads, nothing, no sufficient water, and we must provide some guidelines.
I think right now we are confusing. I'm not confused. I'm just saying, what is it that we can do within a day and a half? We can start with the RPA, visual planning level, and bring it down to a small town level. Point is, what is it that if we are trying to get at principles, yes, that in case it is a peri-urban new development, then what is to be done? If it's to be integrated into a regional plan, then how do we do the master plan? If it is to be retrofitting an old city, then what? So these are three totally different situations for which the paths or avenues taken for transformation will be different.
We want some generic parameters.
Can we prioritize the thrust areas for these?
Specific, something more detailed, because otherwise it will stay high level.
It's not expected specific in detail.
Okay, fine. What we are talking are generic principles.
And those generic principles prioritize for different applications.
Okay, thank you.
Like if it's a new development, then the development plan is a priority.
Okay, folks, what they're saying is generic principles for any city, and then disaggregated with different priorities for different options that they talk about. That's right. Then we can concentrate time. Otherwise, we've got shortage of time. Lots of people.
I remember in Mahesh's presentation, he was very aggressive saying walk to work. Very good. In the new expanding towns or the regional plan, can we have something like walk to work? Is it possible?
Technically, yes.
That goes into land use plan and master plan. That goes into land use plan.
I mean, then getting it master plan.
Exactly.
Okay, can we leave it at that, at your discretion?
Okay, fine.
So that the next group can start?